Welcome to the digestive system. What is the first thing you think of when you think of digestive system? To me, I think of food. And when you think the digestive system, you think of food and how it is digested and absorbed, and what you can't absorb will be excreted. Now, let's begin with the basic discussion of how the digestive system is divided based on the structure. So the basic division of the structures of the digestive system could be divided into two categories. The first one is known as your digestive tract, and the next one will be known as the accessory structures. So let's begin with the digestive tract. It's a tube. So we can say it's a muscular tube extending from the mouth all the way down to the anus. And this includes the mouth, the pharynx, the esophagus, the stomach, the small intestine, and the large intestine. Everything else would be known as accessory structures, which could be found location-wise, could be found within or outside of the digestive tract. An example of this would be your teeth, salivary glands, the pancreas, the liver, and the gallbladder. Now, the next question we want to ask is that what is the function? So what exactly is the function or functions of the digestive tract? By the way, before I go on, is that the digestive tract has different names, also known as AKA alimentary canal or GI tract. When you see the word GI tract, G for gastro, I for intestinal tract. So I'm going to change to a different color to make it easier for the eyes, and I'll go with red. That makes it easier red stands out. Now, what we can also say is that what exactly is or are the functions of the digestive tract? Well, simply put, we can say is that the digestive tract is involved, function-wise, is involved with digesting and absorbing. So there are more functions involved, but these are just the major functions: digesting and absorbing. Accessory structures, in the sense the function-wise, we can say is going to be function-wise. They produce enzymes, or they are involved, they aid in the digestion. So they are involved with digestion. And we'll come back to that later on. Okay. Now, what exactly is bolus? And now let's move on to the terminology of this. Bolus, chyme, and feces. Now, these terms signify the different stages of food as it enters the body and exits the body. So bolus is mushy stuff that you produce in the mouth after you chew and then the food, and then after you add saliva with enzymes in the process of it to assist the breakdown of the food. So bolus is what you have. So in the mouth, bolus is when you have. So what we can say is this: in the mouth, we can say bolus, food is converted into bolus. Whether the food is solid or liquid, by the time it goes through the mouth, it becomes mushier, okay, due to the addition of enzymes and how the food is broken down. Now, chyme is going to be more mushy, more pasty, I should say, and chyme is produced in the stomach. So in the stomach, what we have is going to be bolus is converted to chyme. So if I were to ask you this question, is that where's the first site you find bolus? And the answer would be your mouth. Good. Where is the last site you could find bolus? Very good. The answer is stomach. Where is the first site you find chyme? Very good. Your stomach. Okay. Now, the next thing we want to ask is this, is that the last site in which you find chyme is going to be the end of the small intestine. But let's move on is this, is that feces is present in the large intestine. So the last site that you can find chyme is in the ileum of the small intestine. So we can just put, basically we can say is this, at the end of the small intestine, you can find chyme. So once again is this, the ileum is one of the 3 segments of the small intestine. So the last site to find chyme is in the ileum of the small intestine. All right, any question on this? What I want you to do is this, is that I want you to take notes, okay? Take notes, make sure you formulate questions, and I will answer these questions in the Q&A section of the class. All right. Let's move on to the next page. Next slide, I should say. All right, so these are the functions of your digestive system. So let's define each and every one of them one by one. Okay, first one. What exactly is ingestion? So ingestion is defined as the intake. Okay, so we can say intake of food or water. Okay, simply put, ingestion, intake of food and water. Propulsion is defined as the process of moving the food. So I'll just put food in this case, quote unquote, because it could be bolus or it could be whatever we have, chyme and so on. Within the digestive tract in the direction towards the anus. Okay, so what you want to do is this. Okay, in the direction towards the anus, beginning at the mouth. So propulsion just means that you're moving the food, quote unquote, from the mouth all the way towards the anus. And in the process, you will digest, absorb, and excrete what you can't absorb. Okay. Now, digestion is the process of breaking down. It's defined as the process of breaking down the food into simple forms. So So to facilitate the absorption process. Now, when I say the process of breaking down, there are different forms of digestion. We have what's known as mechanical digestion, which is defined as the physical breakdown of food, and chemical digestion, which is defined as the chemical breakdown of food. We will come back with these different forms of digestion later on with more details, but for now, I just want you to know the purpose of digestion is to break down the food into simple forms or simpler forms. Um, so to facilitate the absorption. Now, absorption, what exactly is absorption? So the basic absorption just means the process of moving nutrients from the lumen of the digestive tract into the bloodstream. So in absorption, you're moving everything from the digestive tract into the bloodstream. So here's what they say is that unless you absorb the nutrients is not a part of you yet until you absorb it. So in the case of malabsorption, where nutrients cannot be absorbed, the nutrients have yet to become a part of you because the nutrients are still in the digestive tract. But until it is absorbed into the bloodstream, the nutrients have yet to become a part of you. Okay? So keep in mind this, absorption just means the uptake of nutrients, which means that you're moving nutrients from one location, in this case, the lumen of the digestive tract, to another location, in this case, the bloodstream. And defecation is defined as the process of excreting materials that cannot be absorbed. Very good. Excellent. Any question on this? Moving to the next slide. Now let's discuss on the layers of the alimentary canal. Now you know I always ask questions about the layers, right? So anticipate of this being a question, okay? So let's begin on the layers of the alimentary canal. Now, there are 4 layers in the GI tract or digestive tract to be a better term to use. So let's see how should we begin. Should we begin from out to in? Let's go from in to out. So the first layer that we have is the mucosa. And we can say this is by far the innermost of the 4 layers. So we can say it's the innermost of the 4 layers. What we can also say is that the mucosa lines the lumen of the digestive tract. Now, what is it composed of? Okay, that's a very good question we can ask is this. What is it composed of? And it is actually composed of, the mucosa is composed of, so when you look at this, I'm going to zoom in for you guys to see, and it's composed of what's known as 1, which is going to be the innermost epithelium. Okay, so this is going to be the innermost and the epithelium lines the lumen of the digestive tract. The next one would be what's called the lamina propria, which is going to be a CT. And the third one is going to be known as muscularis mucosa, okay, which is a smooth muscle. All right, so you can anticipate. I'm going to ask you the question, the layer question. Okay, so just keep in mind of this. I am going to ask you the layer question. Okay, so anticipate of having this to be asked. All right. Now the next one's going to be what's known as submucosa. So underneath so we can say deep to the mucosa, we can say the submucosa, which is composed of A, C, T. Okay. So this is going to be CT, and this is deep to the, it's a CT layer deep to the mucosa. Now remember we talked about the terminology deep, and the reference point when we use that in this sense is going to be, the reference point is the lumen. So anything that is away from it would be deep, and anything that's nearby to it is more superficial. So mucosa is superficial to submucosa. Now the muscularis externa is going to be a smooth muscle, and this smooth muscle is composed of two layers. So it's composed of two layers, okay? And we have what's called the circular muscle and the longitudinal muscle. Now, there is an exception in the stomach, and we are going to talk more about the stomach later on. Okay. Now, what we can also say is that in this context, we can say, so I'm going to zoom in for you to see this. You can see the circular layer and the longitudinal layer in this case. So which one is which? We can say the circular layer is more superficial. Deep to that is the longitudinal layer. So we're beginning from inside out. Okay. Now, if I were to ask you from outside in, it's a different case, correct? Okay. So this is all based on where is the initial site and where is the ending site. And the last one is going to be known as serosa. And we can say this serosa is composed of, this is composed of CT and epi. Right? And this is by far the outermost layer. And this is the outermost. Right? So let's talk about how things are, the questions is. So if I were to ask you a question, this ready? So if I were to ask you a question on the exam, if I were to ask you a question on the exam, and the simple question is, the question would be, I want you guys to look at the screen as I ask you a question. So if I were to ask you a question on the exam, name the layers I must penetrate to remove, to access the lumen of the digestive tract to remove a foreign object. Let's say someone swallow a coin per se, and kids do swallow coins, and it happens to be lodged into one segment of the digestive tract, and we want to go in and remove the coin when we just have to make an incision, and we start and remove, going layer by layer to open it to remove the object. Okay, so let's just, you know, let's use theoretically how would you remove open this. Okay, so we know for a fact what we are beginning from out to in, out to in. Okay, which means the first layers will be serosa, muscularis externa, submucosa, and mucosa. And the lumen will be what you arrive once you cut into the mucosa. Now, as I show you this, you're probably saying, okay, we just need to see a picture of this to justify what we are looking at. And what I would do is I will give you an image. Okay? So I will give you an image, and with the image I'm gonna give you is that I will show you this image as we will have our discussion on this. Okay? So serosa is done. We're done with this serosa. Okay. So we're gonna put 1, 2 in exact sequence, 3, 4. Okay. Now I'm gonna expect you to know more than this. Okay. So in the muscularis externa, we know you begin from what's called longitudinal muscle from the outside, and we're gonna go into this circular muscle on the inside. All right. Now we know the submucosa is just a submucosa, right? But in the mucosa, we can say it's going to be, we're gonna go from out to in. So the order in which you would have to penetrate begins from, let me zoom in for you on this. So it's going to begin from muscularis mucosa, penetrating the lamina propria, and then the last one you would cut would be what's known as epithelium. Okay, so keep in mind, this is how you cut. So let's begin on how to cut, how to penetrate to go from out to in. Serosa, done. From serosa, you go into what's called muscularis externa, which we begin at the longitudinal layer. Then you go into what's called a circular layer. And then from there on, you go to the submucosa. From the submucosa, you move into the mucosa. But there's 3 layers in the mucosa. And the first layer to be cut from out to in would be muscularis mucosa. From the muscularis mucosa, you approach the lamina propria. From the lamina propria, you approach the epithelium. Okay. And once you pass the epithelium, you are in the lumen of the digestive tract. Any question on this? Okay. Any question on this? Very good. Very good. Okay, so what we can do on this is that, let me see if I can cut and paste on this. Perhaps I can. And I'm gonna go back to this and let me see if I can paste what I just showed you right now. I believe I can do it, but let's try to see if I can. Okay. Perfect. Okay, good. So going from out to in, we have what's called serosa. muscularis externa, submucosa, and the mucosa, okay, before you arrive in the lumen. Now, keep in mind this: the muscularis externa has 2 layers, while the mucosa has 3 layers that must be penetrated. All right, any question on this before I move on? Very good. Excellent. So make sure you guys write down make sure you write down your question and ask those questions during the Q&A session. Let's move on to the next slide. The nervous system involved with digestive activities. So in the digestive tract, there is what's called the enteric nervous system. Okay. So figuratively, what people often refer to this enteric nervous system is the enteric nervous system is often referred to as the brain of the digestive tract. So do not misunderstand this as the brain itself. No. What we can say is this: is that the enteric nervous system is the main control system of the digestive activities. Now, what is it composed of? It's composed of the myenteric plexus and the submucosal plexus. And the enteric nervous system is a part of the PNS. Now, what does PNS stand for? Make me proud. Very good. Peripheral nervous system. Excellent. So what I also want you to know is this: is that plexus is defined as network of nerves. Now, something I also want you to understand is that when you look at the plexus, the 2 plexuses, the myenteric plexus controls the movement within the digestive tract. The submucosal plexus controls the secretion process. Very good. Now let's move on to the autonomic nervous system. Now, the autonomic nervous system is not the main control system of the digestive activities, but rather it influences the digestive activities. And as you remember this, is that the 2 subdivisions, yes, the parasympathetic and the sympathetic subdivisions. And we know for a fact also is that the autonomic nervous system belongs to the PNS. All right, let's move on. So if you have a question, just write down a question, and I will address the questions in the Q&A session. once again. Let's move on to the next slide. Digestive processes. The processing of food involves essential activities such as ingestion, propulsion, digestion, absorption, and defecation. So we've talked about all of these. Ingestion, as a quick review. Ingestion just means intake. Propulsion just means process of moving food in the direction towards the anus. Digestion is defined as the breakdown of food into smaller forms so to be absorbed. Mechanical digestion means the physical breakdown, and the chemical digestion is defined as the chemical breakdown and absorption is the uptake of nutrients into the bloodstream. And defecation just means the process of excreting what cannot be absorbed. Now, there are a few examples of mechanical digestion. There are a few examples of chemical digestion, and so on. So let's talk about how things are done. First thing is this, is that I want you to look at the image on the right side, and I want you to look at the image on the right side, and let's make a few notes on this. Ingestion is obviously the intake, so that's easy enough. Now, propulsion, examples of propulsion are going to be swallowing. And we'll come back to swallowing in a moment. There are different phases of swallowing. And peristalsis. And we will talk about peristalsis. But in all cases, propulsion just means the movement, the process of moving food in the direction towards the anus. Now, let's talk about the mechanical digestion. Where does this occur at? Okay. So when you use the word mechanical digestion, we can say is that example of this would be you chew things, mastication. So these are examples of mechanical digestion. And you have what's called churning, the mastication in your mouth, churning in the stomach, and segmentation in the small intestine. And chemical digestion is simply can be stated as what's known as using enzymes. And there are different forms of enzymes that we can talk about, such as lipase represent the enzyme used to break down lipids, and amylase is an enzyme used to break down carbohydrates, and protease are enzymes used to break down what is known as protein. And absorption. So what I want you to do is this, as I say, and I noticed some confusion when you look at the image on the right side, and it shows you two different type of vessels underneath absorption. But in my definition, it says the uptake of nutrients into the bloodstream. So Here's what it means is this, is that you can either absorb straight into the bloodstream or you can absorb into the lymphatic vessel, which then takes the nutrients back into the bloodstream. So either way, it doesn't really matter, is that you can go from the lumen. So in absorption, there are two routes that we take from the lumen into the bloodstream or from the lumen. So these are different ways in which nutrients can go into the bloodstream. Lumen from the lumen into the lymphatic vessel, and from there it goes into the blood vessel. But ultimately, it has to go into the bloodstream. And defecation, means that the process of excreting feces or what cannot be absorbed. And most of the absorption occurs within the small intestine. And simply we can say this, is that when you think of defecation, it's the process of excreting what cannot be absorbed or what has not been absorbed yet. So let's move on to the next slide. The propulsion, like I said in the previous slide, propulsion means you're moving, is the process of moving food in the direction of the anus. And so when you think of swallowing and peristalsis, these are examples of propulsion. When you think of swallowing, is it voluntary or involuntary? I'm gonna pause for a moment as you so you can think. Is swallowing voluntary or involuntary? Good. Swallowing can be voluntary or involuntary. Voluntary and involuntary. And here's the reason why is this. Swallowing has three phases. So there are three phases of swallowing. Number one, the buccal phase. The buccal phase is voluntary process. Then you have what's called pharyngeal phase, which is involuntary process, and esophageal phase, which is going to be involuntary process. Okay, and we'll come back to this with more details, but for now, this is what I need for you to know for now. Okay. Let's go into peristalsis. When you look at peristalsis, there are waves of alternating contraction and relaxation between the two muscles. So you have alternating contraction and relaxation of the circular and longitudinal muscles. So let's begin on the image that you see on the right side. So in peristalsis, you're moving. So it is an example of propulsion. So in peristalsis, you're moving the food from the mouth or towards the direction of the anus. Simply put. So let's begin with the processes involved on the right lower image. First one, we can say in the first one, step one, contraction of the circular muscle behind the bolus. And so you can see behind the bolus. So what that means is this. Why? Why should you contract the circular muscle behind the bolus? So to prevent the bolus from moving backward. Very good. Now step two, contraction of the longitudinal muscles ahead of the bolus. What that means is this, is that so to push the bolus forward. That's the whole purpose of this. Push the bolus forward. So you shorten it, and then the same thing is this. So number two, number three, the purpose of number two, number three is to push the bolus forward. And this is the same thing for number three is this. But in number three, you have a contraction of the circular muscle after you contract the longitudinal muscle. So what you're doing is this. The purpose of this is you push the bolus forward. Very good. Very good. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so like I was saying, there are three phases of swallowing. The first one's called buccal phase, and that would be voluntary. Second phase is pharyngeal phase. So when you think of buccal phase, it's in your mouth. Pharyngeal phase will be in the pharynx. Esophageal phase within the esophagus. Pharyngeal phase will be involuntary. And esophageal phase will be also involuntary. So let's continue on to the next slide. And let's begin with or let's go over the buccal and pharyngeal phases. Okay, so let's go with the buccal phase first. So the buccal phase is in the mouth. And pharyngeal phase will be in the pharynx, that's obvious. So let's orient ourselves now. As you can see, we have the tongue, which is a muscle. We have the palate. We have talked about the palate. The palate separates between the mouth and the nasal cavity. So in this case, and we have what's called the epiglottis and the oropharynx. The oropharynx is the region within the pharynx. And also there's what's called the upper esophageal sphincter. This sphincter or muscle is in the esophagus. So during the buccal phase, the upper esophageal sphincter is contracted. So when you see the word contracted, it means closed. The tongue presses against the hard palate. So the tongue pressed against the hard palate, forcing the food bolus to move into the oropharynx. So once again, let's see how this works. Is that the tongue pushes the food or the bolus of the food up against the palate as it moves towards the oropharynx. And so it pushes against the hard palate, forcing the bolus to move into the oropharynx. Now, once in the oropharynx, we have what's called a pharyngeal phase. Now, do keep in mind this, is the buccal phase is voluntary. And the pharyngeal phase is involuntary phase. So in the pharyngeal phase, what happened is that the uvula and the larynx rise to prevent food from going into the air passage. So the tongue blocks out the mouth. So the tongue blocks out the mouth. The upper esophageal sphincter relaxes, allowing the food to enter the esophagus. So here's what happens is, okay. So once again is that in the pharyngeal phase, what happens is that the uvula rises to prevent the bolus from going into the nasopharynx. So it goes back out your nose. So which means is this, as the uvula goes up, it helps to channel the bolus of food going down into the oropharynx. So it helps to channel everything to move down. And at the same time, the larynx goes up to prevent the bolus of food from going into the air passage, which is the larynx. So all this helps for the bolus of food to move into the esophagus. Now, in the esophageal phase, which means the upper esophageal sphincter contracts, so the food can't go back up into the pharynx, but instead goes down into the esophagus and eventually goes into the stomach. So once again, let's review all of this again. So by the way, also esophageal phase is in the esophagus and also is involuntary phase. Okay, so let's review this. The buccal phase. So let's go back. Let's go back. In the buccal phase, it's in the mouth and it's voluntary. So in the buccal phase, the tongue pushes the bolus of food against the palate, forcing it to go back into the oropharynx. And so forcing it to move into the oropharynx. Now, as it moves into the oropharynx, it pushes the uvula up to prevent the bolus of food from going out or going up into the nose, but also in the pharyngeal phase, the uvula rises to prevent so the uvula rises, as you can see, to prevent food from going into the nose. So I'll make a note on this. The uvula rises to block food from going up into the nose. Going up and out, going up into the, let's use the word, into the nasal cavity. Very good. Okay. And also this is that the epiglottis closes to prevent food from entering the air passage, which is in this case the larynx. So which means the only option it has is to go into the esophagus. Now in the esophageal phase, what we have is going to be the opening or the closing of the, so this is esophageal phase is in the esophagus, it's involuntary. So you have the closure of the upper esophageal sphincter while there's opening of the lower esophageal sphincter, which is also known as cardioesophageal sphincter. So I'm gonna make a little note on this. Okay. So in the esophageal phase, we have the closure of the upper esophageal sphincter and opening of the lower esophageal sphincter. Okay. Now, why closing of the upper esophageal sphincter is to prevent food from going back up into the pharynx. Okay, so the closure of this pharynx, the closure of the sphincter, the closure of the sphincter prevents food from going back into the pharynx. And the opening of, and by the way, the lower esophageal sphincter is also known as cardioesophageal sphincter. And the reason why it must be open is so to allow the food to enter the stomach. Okay, very good. So three phases involved with swallowing. Buccal phase occurs in the mouth, voluntary. Pharyngeal phase occurs in the pharynx, involuntary. Esophageal phase occurs in the esophagus, involuntary. Let's move on to the next one, slide. We are going to begin with the mouth. Let's go into the mouth. Before I begin on the mouth, I want to make a few notes on this. Now, the mouth, in terms of boundary-wise, the mouth is divided into what's known as subdivided into what's known as 1 and 2. Okay. The number 1 is called oral vestibule. Okay. This is the region or the recess, that's how to use the term, region external to the gingiva or the gum. Now we know that the thing, and the reason why I'm very cautious of using the word teeth is this, is that when you age, there's a good chance your teeth will fall out, but your gum will always be with you, regardless the fact that it's going to recede, but you are going to have some form of gum in your mouth. So any region outside of or external to the gum is called the oral vestibule. Now, the next region is going to be known as oral cavity proper, is going to be defined as the region internal to the gingiva, and that's what we often refer to as the mouth. Okay. So a lot of people, when they use the word the mouth, they think the region called oral cavity proper. Now, the next question I want to ask you is this: what type of tissue is in the mouth? What type of epithelium is in the mouth? And the answer is, you should know this. The answer is going to be, very good, non-keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium. It's a mouthful, I know, but you have to know this. Now, in the mouth, we have teeth. Okay, so the question is, what exactly do you use the teeth for? Okay, well, we know for a fact it's for chewing. You don't even have to take the class and you know it's used for chewing, right? Okay. Now let's talk about the teeth. How many teeth do we have? And the answer should be, there should be a total of 32. Okay, good. So we can say there should be a total of 32. Okay, 16 at the top and 16 at the bottom. All right, very good. Any questions so far? So let's continue with the teeth, and we have, so there are 32 teeth, and the way we divide everything would be the incisors. So I will show you the incisors. I will put them as incisor 1, 2, 3, four. So these are the first four that you see right here are the incisors. Now moving on to what's called a canine. I'm very sure you know what a canine looks like. So there will be one on each side. So we can say is this: there are four incisors at the top, two canine at the top. Now we have what's called premolar, two on each side at the top, and the molar, there should be three on each side at the top. Okay, now let's make a note on this. The third molar is known as the wisdom tooth, and the wisdom tooth erupts in late teenage years. So for that reason, it's often referred to as the wisdom tooth because by your late teenage years, early 20s, when the wisdom tooth erupts or comes out, you should have more wisdom by that time in your life. So for that reason, it's called a wisdom tooth. Now, let's go on to the next one is this. Let's talk about the basic structure of the tooth. The tooth has two regions, or three regions, the regions of the tooth. You have what's known as the neck, the crown. Above the crown is above the gum. The neck is within the gum, and the root is within the socket, or within the socket of the mandible and the maxilla. So let me just add a few notes onto this. So the region, the crown, is above the gum. The neck is within the gum, so it's buried within the gum. Within the gum. And the root is going to be in the, you can't see the root, so it would be within the jaw bones. They are going to be the maxilla and the mandible. So here's what I want to ask you is this. Okay, now look at the image that we have on the right lower image. You see three regions: the crown, the neck, and the root. Okay. Now do keep in mind this, the crown is visible. You can always see the crown. The neck, you can't see the neck until your gum recedes. You can never see the root unless they extract your tooth or your teeth. Okay. Now, we also want to ask the next question is going to be what? The next question was the next point, not the next question. We're going to focus on the composition of the tooth. Okay, so we can say the composition of the tooth is going to is composed of what's called dentine. All right. Okay. So the dentine basically is the foundation or the framework of the tooth. So let's cross out the word composition. Let's use the word dentine. The dentine basically forms the framework of the tooth. Okay. Now the dentine is covered by the enamel. So in the crown, the enamel covers the dentine in the crown. All right. And in the neck, the dentine is not covered by anything. So in the neck, the dentine is not covered by anything other than the gum. And so the gum basically is covering the dentine. In the root, so these are the regions that we have: the crown, the neck, and the root. Okay. So in the crown, the enamel covers the dentine. In the neck, the gum covers the dentine. And so for that reason, when the gum recedes, the neck is more sensitive than anything else because it's not covered by anything. And in the root, the dentine is covered by what's called a cement or cementum. So in the root, the dentine is covered by the cementum. All right. Now, the next thing we're going to ask is going to be, what else can we ask? Okay. So let's focus on this for a moment. Now, also is this at the very center of the tooth, you have what's called pulp cavity, which is going to be space at the center of the dentine of the tooth. Let's use it to a tooth containing living tissues, which include the blood vessels and the nerve and so on. Okay. Now, what happens is when you have a root canal procedure done, what they do is because of the abscess. So what happened is let's go back to the beginning of this. Okay. And before I move on, I can say is that there's also what's called a root canal, which serves as a passage for blood vessels and nerves to enter the pulp cavity. So here's what happened when there's a root canal procedure done. So in the root canal procedure done, the purpose of this root canal procedure is that to remove all of the abscess in the pulp cavity. So what happened? Everything begins with what's called what's called dental caries, which is a cavity in the tooth. Now, the purpose of that is that the cavity can infiltrate, and it will infiltrate into the pulp cavity. Now, once the bacteria enters the pulp cavity, it will kill off all the tissues in the pulp cavity, producing abscess. Okay. Now, what happened would be the abscess would infiltrate into the root canal and could possibly infect the jaw bones. So now, before it has a chance to go into the jaw bones, hopefully the pain is excruciating enough for you to seek treatment. So what happened is that in a root canal procedure, the dentist goes in, and to be more specific, you should go to get a root canal procedure, you should go to what's called endodontist, and it costs more, but they are specialists in terms of the root canal procedures. And so the endodontist, what he or she does is that he or she allows you to use there. Okay. So the endodontists, they go into the pulp cavity, they remove all of the abscess, and they kill off what's known as the remaining nerves. And so which means and then they block off so they kill off all the nerves and they block off what's known as the root canal. Okay. And what would happen is they shave down the tooth, and they would put a cap on, right? And they would mold your tooth before they actually shave it. They would mold it, and then what would happen is that when they mold the tooth, they will measure the tooth, and they will make a crown to put in place of what has been removed. But be cautious on this, is that a crown, so after you do a root canal procedure, the tooth is dead. It's just a dead structure, which means the tooth is very weak. And over time, the tooth will the tooth will decay and gradually will basically will break off. And also this what's really concerning is the gum. a lot of people don't take care of the gum, and what happens is if the gum is basically is infected, the gum will swell up and the tooth will fall out. The gum is the one that holds the tooth inside the socket of the jawbone. So without the gum, the tooth would just fall, just kind of is falls out. So take care of your teeth as well as your gum. And when you do that, the teeth will be with you longer. All right, moving on to the next one. Let's go up to your tongue. Okay, so we know the tongue is a skeletal muscle that you know of. Okay, so the tongue is a skeletal muscle. Controlled by CN12. What is CN12? Hypoglossal nerve. Okay, very good. When the tongue mixes masticated food with saliva, initiating swallowing. Now, also, I want you to know is this, the tongue also contains taste buds. So the tongue also contains these projections called papillae, which house taste buds. Now, I want to ask you this question: is that which nerves is involved with taste? Let's go with nerves involved with taste. Very good. CN7, 9, and 10. Very good. Okay. Excellent. CN7, 9, and 10. Very good. Let's move on. So life is very crucial. So our mouth is very moist, and the moistness of the mouth is due to the saliva. Now, first question we want to ask is this: why should we produce saliva? For what reason? Now, the functions of saliva are saliva help to buffer against acidic food, to prevent erosion of the teeth. So here's the downfall is this. If you have a dry mouth, there's an increased chance of getting dental caries. So dental caries means cavities. So saliva help to buffer against acidic food. Next thing would be, the next function is saliva dissolves chemicals for tasting. If you have a dry mouth, you can't taste the food that you eat. The reason why is the taste buds can only detect the chemicals released from the food. So what we can also make them know of this is that taste buds can only detect the chemical molecules uh, released from food. Now also saliva help to moisten and bind the food together into bolus. And bolus is formed in the mouth. Now there are two different types of salivary glands, and they are intrinsic and extrinsic. Well, as you can see, the intrinsic salivary glands are found in the mouth, found within the mouth. and they always produce saliva in small quantity, so to keep mouth moist. Okay. The extrinsic salivary glands are found outside the mouth, found outside of the mouth, and the purpose of this and ex example of these are going to be known as parotid gland, sublingual gland, and submandibular gland, and they only produce saliva when the stimulus in the form is present. And stimulus could be in the form of what you see, the smell of food, the thought um, process, the thought, think about food, um, the sight of food. All these will cause the extrinsic salivary gland to produce saliva. Now, why? So the extrinsic salivary gland only produce saliva when the stimulus is present. And the additional saliva produced helps or aids in the processing So the additional saliva produced aids in the chemical digestion of food. Now we know saliva contains enzymes, and what comes with saliva are enzymes, and the enzymes help to digest the food in the mouth. Okay, let's move on. Let's move it. So we're done with the mouth. Let's go to the pharynx. Okay, now, the pharynx is a passage shared by bolus and air. Okay, so when you think of bolus, we think of food, right? So the pharynx can be divided into three regions: nasopharynx, oropharynx, and laryngopharynx. So what exactly is the nasopharynx? And the nasopharynx is defined as an air passage. Now, what type of epithelial tissue could you find in the nasopharynx? I'm going to pause for a minute and then I will answer the question. I'm going to let you, say the answer to yourself and then I will reiterate the answer. And double check your answer with mine. The nasopharynx, the epithelial tissue is known as pseudo stratified ciliated columnar epithelium. And does that ring a bell? Hopefully so, right? Hopefully so. We have talked about this before. I hope it makes sense. I hope it makes sense. It should make sense because I spent a lot of time on this in the tissue chapter. So it should make a lot of sense. Very good. Now, the oropharynx is a passage for air and bolus passage. And what kind of tissue is this made, or can you find in the oropharynx? Well, the oropharynx contains non-keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium. And the same goes for laryngopharynx, same tissue type. Now, what is the laryngopharynx serves as? It's also an air and bolus passage. Okay, now what we can also ask the next question is this. Okay. The nasopharynx is a continuation to so the nasopharynx is also a continuation to, so I'm going to put NK as nasopharynx, NP, I'm sorry, NP connects, is continuous with the nasal cavity. So air goes into the nose. The first thing it goes into is going to be what's known as, very good, the nasopharynx. In addition to this, we could find what's known as also the nasopharynx contains pharyngeal tonsils, or known as adenoid. Very good. The oropharynx, I will abbreviate as OP, is continuous with the oral cavity, and it contains I'm curious which tonsils. Oh, by the way, there's also one thing I forgot to tell you guys is this. It also contains what's known as the lingual tonsil, very good, and the palatine tonsil. Okay, good. Now the nasopharynx also contains what's called the tubal tonsil. Very good. You guys are getting on. You guys are making me so much, I take pride because you guys remember your materials from the lymphatic system. Okay, very good. And the laryngopharynx is connected to, so the laryngopharynx output LP connects with the larynx and esophagus. So it connects with the laryngopharynx, connects with the larynx, output L right here, and esophagus behind that. Okay, so it connects with the larynx in the front, and esophagus in the back. Very good. Let's move on to the next slide. We're moving at a very proper, esophagus. So let's go on to the esophagus. So what is that? Esophagus basically is a passage. It's a food passage. Okay. And we can say this is a bolus passage. And it contains what's known as non-keratinized, stratified, squamous epithelium. Very good. Excellent. The esophagus is 25 centimeter in length. The majority of it is in the thorax. So the majority of the esophagus, the majority of the esophagus could be found in the thorax, okay? With the exception of 1.5 centimeter could be found in the in the abdomen. The last 1.5 centimeter can be found in the abdomen. Now, within the esophagus, there are two sphincters. So by the way, I want you guys to look down onto the bottom left image. You can see that this image that we're seeing right here represent, let's zoom in. You can see that this image represents what's known as the non-keratinized stratified squamous epithelium. Now, the esophagus has two esophageal sphincters. So sphincter just means, so sphincter represents circular muscle found at the opening of a tube. Now, there are two esophageal sphincter. The first sphincter is going to be known as first sphincter is going to be called upper esophageal sphincter. This is going to be known as skeletal muscle. Now, this sphincter closes during breathing, so air will not enter the stomach during breathing. And it opens during eating. So bolus can enter the esophagus from the pharynx. The second sphincter will be known as the lower esophageal sphincter, which is also known as, so this sphincter is a smooth muscle, and this sphincter is also known as aka cardioesophageal sphincter. And this sphincter opens during the esophageal phase of swallowing, so bolus can enter the stomach. So in all fairness, we can say the esophagus, the majority of the esophagus could be found in the thorax, and the last 1.5 centimeter could be found in the abdomen. So what we can say is this, is that in terms of tissue, in terms of muscle-wise, the top 1/3 of the esophagus contains skeletal muscle. The bottom 1/3 of the esophagus contains smooth muscle, while the middle 1/3 of the esophagus means mixture of both skeletal and smooth muscle. And before I go on, you're probably wondering is this what exactly is the function of the esophagus? It's a passage. That's all it is. It's a passage. So, so there is mucus in the esophagus that help to lubricate the movement of the bolus into from the pharynx into the stomach. So the esophagus is a passage between that connects to the pharynx and the stomach. All right, moving on to the stomach.